Uh, we're starting our second unit today, Jesus and the Temple. And the lessons are, first of all, today, boy, Jesus in the temple. That'll be followed by Lord of the Sabbath, cleansing the temple. And finally, Jesus predicts the temple's destruction. Now, the lesson today is the boy Jesus in the temple. And the lesson today is from Luke 2:41 through 52. And main idea behind our lesson today is that Jesus, even at age 12, as early as that, understands his relationship to the temple, even more than his parents understood. And our scripture, once again, Luke 2:41 through 52. Now, every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the festival of the Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual for the festival. When the festival was ended and they started to return, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents were unaware of this. Assuming that he was in a group of travelers, they went a day's journey. Then they started to look for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this? Your father and I have been anxiously looking for you." He said to them, "Why were you searching for me? Did you not know that I must be in my father's house?" They did not understand what he said to them. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. And his mother treasured all these things in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human faith. Now, some of the background of this would be the text tells the story of Jesus' second visit to the temple. And the first visit occurred when Mary and Joseph brought him to the temple to be dedicated to the Lord. Now, two individuals were there to greet him. Simeon was a devout man who had been promised by the Holy Spirit that he would see the Messiah. The Holy Spirit tells him that Mary's baby is him. So Jesus' second visit to the temple is described in our lesson today. Now, the reason for the visit is to attend the Passover festival. Jesus is only age 12. Then there's the oversight. He is accidentally left behind by his parents. And when they can't find him, they go back to the temple and find him discussing theology with the Jewish teachers. The teachers themselves, in effect, are being taught. So Mary chastises him, saying, "Why did you do this to us, your parents?" Jesus answered, "You should have known I would be in my Father's house." His parents can't fully understand about what he is saying. Now, Luke's purpose is to show certainty in the Christian teaching. First, Jesus was allowed into the temple. He was found sitting at the feet of the elders. He spoke with them and conversed with them. He not only was taught, but he was able to teach them. "By your students you'll be taught." It's an old phrase. He came to know he had a place in his Father's house. And how does the lesson speak to us today? And characteristic of Jesus. And it comes up even more later in Luke. when there's the story of the sinful woman. He was invited for dinner along with his disciples by a very wealthy man. And while he's there, Luke describes that the sinful woman came in, sneaked in, somehow got in, and she has taken some ointment that she had bought and rubbed Christ's feet. And the person giving the dinner was kind of outraged. Why would you let a woman like that touch you? That wouldn't your skin just crawl? It seems to say that word. But Jesus tells him that the woman had spent the money on probably all she had to buy the perfume, and that she had to wash Jesus' feet, and that he cared. That's the one thing that leaked out to me. Jesus cared. He's deep caring for someone. And so that's the one thing that I've always come back to that. I think it's well. But it's such a wonderful story. It shows how he cared for others, even the sinful woman. He cares for her. And he explains not only to the people who were there, but to his disciples, to the one holding the feast, and everybody else. If the woman had faith, he cared for her too. And so what is our lesson speak to us today? Christ listened to the temple at age 12. What's it say to us? What do we take out of that today? One thing that our book, one tack that our lesson guide to was, how do we help our young people today? Now, Jesus was 12 at the time, but right now, how on earth do you deal with teenagers? I mean, really. And going back over my own life, I had 2 daughters first. I was talking ahead of time. Everything was sweetness and light. Then the sun came along, and there were fights every night. There was fights over television, fights over the bedroom space, fights over everything. And it even got physical. I remember one of the times when my second daughter slammed the door in David's face. Oh, it's unreal. But at any rate, I don't know if I could go back and be a teenager again. I don't think I could do it. I don't think I'd survive one thing. Being a teenager is difficult. And how do we bring young people in our community to faith? What do you think? I'd like some comments.
Being an example.
Being an example, okay? Yeah. Like how?
In little ways and big ways, we acknowledge it, ask their opinion.
Listening.
And listening.
Yeah.
Commiserating with them.
Yeah, commiserate.
Take a church, walk out before they turn 12.
Yes.
Keep inviting them and their families to church.
That's what being taken to church. It establishes a pattern, being in a community of faith. And you see how people within a church community kind of grow to the kingdom. They learn from each other, they help each other, they kind of each other. It's just the spirit, being in a community of faith. I remember growing up, being at 2 churches when they were first started. There was a small place up in the next block. Family called the Derndy. It was on the whole square block. And they had a summer house there. There was no air conditioning there. Summer house was, they cut into the side of the hill where it would be cooler, towards the side of the side. And so later on, after the Derndy was then, college owned it, but different church groups would start there. And I remember how John Calvin got started. First of all, there were only 5 or 6 people. And the guy who was the VA chaplain named Faust came and put a log on the fireplace. Usually people would get there, 5, 6 people. He brought along some hymn books and we sang. Then he had to run for his other duties. He had to handle the Franklin Presbyterian Church, and I think one more, in the group too. That's how John Calvin got started. First of all, 5, 6. It was easy for me. I could walk up there. That was a walk away from home. And my parents were still sick. I would go and listen to that. It was so good. Along with the fireplace, there was a feeling among that group. And all of a sudden, the group started to grow. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. Then they built the chapel out in front of the VA hospital, and then a much larger church building, the Presbyterian Church. So that's how churches get started. Very small community of faith, and it builds. Gloria Day Lutheran Church was another example. They were meeting in an open field. There was a field in Meadowbrook. Took as you went in to the right, you drive down the road, and people would stand on open ground and would sing, and the church service right there, just standing in an open field. And my father had an old portable organ. It was the kind that was issued to troops in the Second World War. It could be carried. It looked like a suitcase. It was a pump organ. So that was the source of the music. They got larger and larger. Then they built a chapel, and then a church, Glory Day Lutheran Church. So that's how communities of faith bring people in, really get started. And there's a feeling that you really can't fully describe. Everybody just enjoyed it, and they look forward to coming back again and again. So, teenage years, golly, I'm trying to think of all the different problems that I put my family through during my teenage years. I hated high school. And at one point, I just stopped going. Except both parents were teachers away from the house. I could stay home and listen to rock and roll all day instead of going to listen to the house. I couldn't stand. And then I got called. Then there was unpleasantness. That's how the rock and roll. So at any rate, teenage years. Oh my word. I remember one other awful thing. And I learned from my father the way I don't know if it's a good lesson to do. Night finally arrived. There was only one car in the family. When I was allowed to take the family car on a date, and I had to swear that nothing would happen to that car. Not a scratch, nothing. Of course, I was going to drive the gas out of it. That's what I was going to do. But anyway, I was so careful with that car.
What kind of car was it?
It was a 1949 green Ford. Yeah. Looked like a watermelon. Anyway, I was so careful with that car. I got into the driveway, eased it into the driveway, went up to my bedroom, got up the next morning, looked out the window, the car was gone. I had not set the handbrake. In the car, it rolled down the hill and skipped over the curb and landed broadside in Dr. Campbell, who was a surgeon out of the VA, in his rose garden. So you had this rose garden, and there was the car sitting right in the middle. The crowd was starting to collect. I thought, oh my gosh. I went down there, and Dr. Campbell was waving his arms. My rose garden. What am I going to do with it? anybody's gonna pay for this, we'll have to get two wreckers to lift the car out, one for the front, one for the back, so it won't be harmed anymore. And so while I was watching all this, as a member of the crowd that had collected, my father comes up behind me and says, "Get the car, started it up, put it back." And I went and did that. Thanks, we learned from our parents, you know. But at any rate,
Was it a straight drive?
yeah, it was.
49.
Yeah, 49.
But it was a turtle, it went fast, some of them.
Not a family car, it was a four-door Ford. And, if there was an election, probably be the ugliest car that was ever back to the 49, I think that'd be the top of the heap. So, at any rate, our teenage years, think about it. Think about what we went through, what we put our parents through, what we learned. And we learn all sorts of things from our father and mother. It's not that they just sit down with us and say, "Now I'm going to teach you this lesson, I'm going to teach you that lesson." You learn the way with how they handle things, how they handle life, how they weather the financial crises, how they manage other problems within a family, all sorts of things. But you learn.
Vic,
Yeah,
the examples of our teenage years and examples of teenage years of people that are teenagers now are totally different. And, we had more personal, role models and examples, around us to learn from, and it was fewer and further between, whereas today they're bombarded with people and things trying to teach them and tell them what to be and how to be and so forth and so on. And it's tough. It's never been easy, but I don't think it's ever been any tougher than it is right now. But I think the key thing with, we all need to have faith, we all need to have hope, and as you mentioned, we need to be examples, but don't judge them too quick. 13-year-old person and a 33-year-old person are two different individuals. And it takes a lot to get from 13 to 33. So,
there's Christ taught us. We care for each other. Not only our parents, but those people we meet in everyday lives. Think back to your friends in high school, the scrapes that got you out of, the scrapes you got them into, any number of things.
in the last few years, I've worked directly with middle high school age kids, and I love quotes, and verbally will get them to get me quotes from different people, different things, or bring me their favorite quote. And this year, for whatever reason, I had 6 come with out of the Bible, and so that's an encouraging thing that just on their own, something that was inspiring to them for scriptures, and it kind of blew me away, quite frankly. I was kind of made my day. There's plenty of good things out there. We just need to look for them and to continue to try to help and encourage other people.
Then again, parents look down on this from their exalted position. They hear the children spouting the most incredible, crazy ideas in the world, and you wonder what's going to happen. What's going to happen? In a way, the older you get, the more you come back to the anchor in your life. What they taught you, you go back to it. So, kind of just pull back to it. So that's the encouraging. So, when we think about how many times our parents helped us, and through those years, and through all the things they helped, financial insecurity, maybe finances, maybe illnesses, maybe any number of things, because life is full of the unexpected. That's the only thing. So, our parents brought us up in faith. That'll be with us. That'll be our anchor, for the rest of our lives.
I think you're making the assumption that a lot of these kids have parents. Because Tracy and I, we volunteered, when our kids went over to, we volunteered at Washington, we volunteered at Knox, we volunteered at Sullivan High School. And we volunteered for the first 2 hours of the morning, so I went to the desk. And so many times kids would walk in at 9 o'clock in the morning on a cold winter day, and you're like, "Where's your jacket?" I said, "Well, I don't have a jacket." "Well, Dick and your mom, I haven't seen mom and dad for 2 or 3 days." And you're like, you're talking to a 10-year-old, you haven't seen your parents and you left in the house. So another good reason for the church to try to help advance some of these young kids, because a lot of these kids have no parents.
My wife taught there, and she told me she had one student, maybe one, both parents were in prison. And so they end up at Ann's house or grandma's house, and that's not, and they're not raising their kid, they're giving them a place to sleep. So both parents be in prison.
I think a great example of some of our kids get the messages each Sunday. The insight. I'm floored by what some of these kids are saying. So you got into it, it's inspiring.
Think about Twain, building houses, missionary trips, caring for others in practice. Really, just, it's wonderful. See that.
I don't think they're forgetting it either. It's like you go back, when they came back and spoke after coming back to Mexico, some of those kids were like, I can't believe people don't have running water. You're like, really? They don't have air conditioning. Really? It's good that a lot of these kids, and then here and all of it, we got it. So good here. Here you go. Maybe we need to pay it forward more. So I agree. Here in Youth Sunday and come back and plan. I think what we can do is continue to support the plan. Absolutely. And help the youth, because I'll be joking. I think that's how we, old people like us, can help the young folks by helping fund some of these things.
And these young people's lives spill over into other young people's lives. And there's some years you're talking about, and so,
Yes.
the more we can nurture, growing up, and as I said, school was hard for me, and I was hard for school, and it was kind of an ongoing, battle in that thing, but, different troubles and different things. Throughout my, I never questioned about whether or not I was loved. And I think love is such a key part of all of our successes. And I think that, for any young person feels like they're loved, I think it's a huge leg up. So, or, in our Christ like walks, we can help spread that. Good thing.
We live in a prosperous society right now. My father told me stories of teaching back in the Depression. He kept a shoebox under his desk. And when there were worn shoes that somebody was ready for, he put it in the shoebox. Sometimes the students would come to class and just almost couldn't bear it. The shoes were just falling apart. So Dad said, "Look, if you see me after school today," they would go through the shoebox and try to find a pair of John where it would be a lot better shape. There's no guarantee that we'll never go through bad economic times again. No guarantee.
The formality of our normal 11 o'clock worship service as a teenager didn't appeal to me. it was structured and all, it was not comfortable. But the youth activities were very informal, and they were so much more enticing. You could let your hair down, and it could be, and there were some cool people in there too. And nothing affected me more than back then they formed a group called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And talk about role models. And it was cool to hang around them. Your coaches were in it, the girls were in it and all that, but it was informal. It wasn't like a worship service. But, and I think that's important for our youth too. And I think anybody who's worked with them, the informality is what really attracts them too.
You have to speak to them as people almost. Okay. I don't know how well I listened as a teenager. You know, the parents had car keys handed over. So, you know, that was powerful. Sitting, you know, not wheels. I mean, just nothing.
Well, many kids today don't care about getting a driver's license as long as they can connect with the internet. And that was in part of the study that we did here at the church.
The internet, how life has changed. Of course, I remember staying on the phone for an hour on end, you know, teenage years. Boy, my parents would get so mad. My father came in and says, "Why are you on the phone so long? Can't do it. I need to use the phone. Why don't you wait till you get your own phone and pay for it?" And I looked at that phone service, the money. Then he wakes up and comes into my bedroom. There's a guy that drilling a hole in the wall to run the electrical line. He says, "Well, what are you doing? So I'm adding the extra phone." Infuriated. He also told me, he said, "You get the car when you can afford it. You can buy it yourself." Little did he know, I had a paper route. I'd scraped up $40. And there was one of my fellow students. His name was Gary Grimm. And he had a Grimm car that he was willing to partner with for $40. It was a Henry J. Somebody know the Henry J? Now that looks like a watermelon on little bitty wheels. The switch, he dropped out of it. And he'd taken the switch off of the lamp so that you reach under the dashboard, pull the chain, to start the car. So I gave him $40. So I drove it home. And my father says, "Where did you get that?" I said, "Well, I own it now. Here's a Bible." And I said, "You said I could have a car as soon as I can afford one. Well, I bought it." He said, "It's not the car, it's insurance." I said, "You didn't say anything about the insurance."
Better learning experience.
Yeah, I'll tell you a learning experience about Henry J. I'd agreed to take this girl home, and I was proud of that car. It looked like a cow would get in front of it. It was dead and all. And so I thought I'd better sneak out of the shop 5 minutes before the end of school to make sure I could get it started. I didn't want to be embarrassed in front of the girl. And my friends in the shop knew what I was doing, so they wired me. Oh, you ever, we're talking about the torpedo, wired it so we started the car to blow up. And so I sneaked out early, not knowing that thing. I switched over my lamp, under the dash, pressed the button, and then it blew up. The hood jumped up, smoke going everywhere. It was running out of the building to see what I parked in a circle. I was so proud of the car. And a crowd had gathered around it. And it never happened to me. I'm sitting behind the wheel just like that, scared. And so the girl comes bounding down the steps. She didn't know about the bond. She thought that they were admiring the car. She jumps in the car, the engine finally caught and drove off. Right.
Let me tell you more about Henry J.
Okay, tell me what.
I was in the service, I was stationed in Alaska. This friend of mine in the company had 51 Henry J. And we was out one night down in a little community called Mountain View, probably 27 like 15 below zero.
Yeah.
So we was out cooking in that little Henry J. I don't think it had it either. I think somebody had a bottle of bourbon and we wet it in a salt.
I'll meet you up.
Well, we came out of that place and kicked in the day, two of us dropped in the back seat. And I was in the passenger side in the front and I pulled the door shut and banged it. I slammed it again, it was like, I said, oh, this silly door. He said, let me get my foot in, it'll be all right. Oh. The little army was hanging out the door.
The 15 was low. Yeah. It makes me feel like the Boy Scouts. I love it. It's freezing. Well, listen, that, in conclusion, think about how there are times when our parents help us throughout lives. And think about the teenage years, age 12, as Christ was, and after that, you know. He brought us up, we committed to your faith, gave us a life. Okay, Keegan, I'll let you dismiss us from